Okay, so I'm back. Turns out that when I turn on the tablet that I have connected to my computer, my Linux operating system thinks that my new tablet is a new Ethernet connection, and so tries to connect to that Ethernet connection as well, which took down my internet connection, or at least took down some sort of aspect of my internet connection, which meant that the streaming system could no longer connect with YouTube. So I've had to reset, and this will be a part 2 of the stream. If you haven't seen the part 1, then definitely look at that part for context. Otherwise, what goes on next may not make a lot of sense. Okay, so back to where we were. I believe when I left off, I was talking about Sheets, Google Sheets, and how the cell referencing works in Google Sheets. Just to reiterate where we were there. So if you reference a particular cell, you can say something like A1, and A1 corresponds to that cell there, A1. But if you want to reference a range of cells, then you can say A1 to A100, and that references A1 to not all of those cells, sorry, but A1 through A100, through A100, so all of those cells there. There's also a way you can reference. Just going to check the stream is working. Seems to be okay. Great. There's also a way you can reference all of the cells in a column by saying A1 through A, and that just says A1 through to the end of A. You can also specify the specifics of the tab, because these tabs have different names, by saying, in this case, I would say I'm interested in the inbox tab. So I would say inbox, I think it's exclamation mark. Let me check that by looking somewhere. Yeah, inbox exclamation mark, and then the cell reference. So this is the kind of sheet that I want to, the kind of string that I want to use to reference. Something's going on with my computer, sorry. Give it a second. Okay, sorry about this. I think something's just going on with Firefox for some reason, where that particular tab was really not happy, or that particular window is really not happy. So let me start again here. So to reference these different cells that I'm interested in here, I can say inbox A2 through the end. So that's what I'm going to do back here. Thread. ID range is going to be inbox, exclamation mark, A2 through the end. So A2 here because the first cell is the title of the tab. So great. So the next thing I'm going to pass is the reference to the thread ID range. It is telling me unexpected token. Okay, great. So now I have current thread IDs, which is a spreadsheet value get call. So if I go back to my example that I had to shut down here, I'm interested in spreadsheet values get. So let's go back to here. Values get. Okay, then it seems to say value render option, major dimension, date time render option, do it, await. So this returns a spreadsheet value get call, which doesn't seem like it's actually given me the data. Let me just try to print it like we had before, so that I can orient where I'm at. Current. So ultimately I want to get to something which is a list of current thread IDs. So I'm just going to put this line down here. It's telling me that this, whatever this returns, still doesn't implement the thing. So it definitely can't be the value that I want. Here are the things that are in the example here. Value render option, how values should be represented in the output. The default render option is formatted value. C sets the value render option query property to the given value. Okay, I'm just going to go with the default option there, and then I can change it if I need to. The major dimension that results should use. For example, if the spreadsheet data is an A1, B1, A2, B2, then requesting major dimension rows returns 1, 2, whereas requesting columns returns thing. Okay, so I do want to change this one, which is the major dimension should be set to columns. Sorry. Major dimension, new value here can be columns. Okay. Date time render option. How dates times and okay, I don't mind that one because I'm not dealing with dates. I'm just dealing with IDs. And do it, perform the operation you have built so far. So do it. Now it returns a future, but as we saw before, I need to call await on a future to actually execute that operation. Okay, so now it returns something that I can actually print, which is a result of response body value range. So let me run that and see what I get. Great, so I get an OK response, status headers, blah, 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 blah. And it unpacks into all of these strings. Where did this start? Value range. Okay, major dimensions, some columns, range. Okay, so the result it sends me back here doesn't seem particularly interesting, at least not in terms of values. The value range, the range is what I want. So the result actually is interesting here because this result, the status of this result is important for what I was talking about in terms of the error checking before. So if the Google Spreadsheets API is down, or the internet on the machine that is running this code is down, then I need to check that and not just throw a panic, because that would bring down the script. So I want to actually check this result of current thread IDs here. I'm just going to keep it as called as current thread IDs, but I'm going to add an if statement, which is if current thread IDs dot. Okay, so there is an is okay on this. So I wonder what happens if this is not okay. So what I could do is I could check the docs to work out what it returns if it's not okay. But another option that is kind of nicer, just in terms of seeing what actually happens, is if I just make up an ID that doesn't exist here. This presumably is going to give me some sort of error. It should be fine in terms of building the response, but when it returns here, when it tries to go to the sheet, I'm assuming this sheet does not exist, or a sheet with this ID does not exist, and so this will be some sort of error. So let's see what this gives. Error bad request object. So I am actually going to go to the docs here, because what I want to check is whether I can just do if current thread IDs is error, do something. I'm not sure if a 404, for example, would return an error in that outer layer, because if you remember, we saw here it returns like a okay and then the response and then the values. But if this might still return okay even if the status was 404. It just depends on how the Google Sheets API treats that outer kind of option. So how am I going to see that? Maybe the best way is just to go into the code and see if I can see it. Okay, so this seems to be the do it operation, which is when the request is actually sent. This is an authentication token, so if there's an authentication token, if the token's missing, it returns an error. If the retry doesn't work, it returns an error. Okay, this is what I want. If it returns an okay, does it return an okay only if it's a 200, or does it return an okay in other cases as well? Yeah, so it doesn't look like it checks for it being a 200 or anything. Res body string. Oh, no, it does, sorry. If res status is success. So only if res status is success. Yeah, and that's the header status. And the is success says either, I'm assuming that self.errorget is the actual, yeah, okay, so check if the status is within 200 to 299. Great. So only if it's a successful request will it return a option with some, otherwise it will return an error. So I think I can just say if current threads is error, do some error checking. I'm just going to leave that out for now. To do some error checking. So the reason I'm leaving that out for now is because I don't have a notion of like a loop yet in which this is running. Because this is all just one block, I've done the error checking, so this is actually not a very descriptive statement, but what I probably should do here is go to next iteration of the loop, or of the I should go straight to sleep. And I'm just going to add a comment here because it's not immediately obvious from current thread IDs as error that this has done the 404 checking. So if response is not in range 200 to 299, then what I should do is just go straight to end of this pass. Great. So going back to the happy path, so I might want to add a further check here, which is just to say if the status is anything other than 200. Just to make that check kind of stricter, because it's not the worst thing in this script's logic. It's not the worst thing if it returns, I don't know why it would return anything other than 200, but if it did return, 200 is the status code for a successful request, whereas for example 201 we used to submit data to a server to create a new resource. So really, if it's a legitimate request, I think it should be, I mean, the status codes 200 to 299 are all success codes, but this API, the way that I'm using this API is that it should always return 200. So I'm going to add an OR statement here. Or I'm actually going to do it down here. So this is doing most of my error checking for me, but I also want to check that, just more strictly check that the status is definitely 200. And the way I'm going to do that is saying if let OK response, don't need that part, equals this response comes from this struct. Does it come from the struct? Status version headers. I think it does come from that struct. Let's check where it comes from. Do it. This is the happy case. Okay. Return match server response some bad request. Let result value equals okay decoded value range. let result value. Probably better to look at the docs. Okay, it's a hyper response, probably. HTTP response. So I don't remember how to... So the issue, or what I'm trying to work out here is this if-let syntax in Rust allows you to say, if this, whatever this expression here, pattern matches appropriately to whatever you put on the right-hand side here. So the right-hand side, for me in this case, is going to be current thread IDs. Then to do something. So I'm getting an error, but let's ignore that for now. This syntax says if this left-hand side pattern matches the value that's in the right-hand side, then you go to this conditional. So I'm trying to basically create some deconstruction of this kind of format that we're looking at here in order to more strictly check whether the response is strictly 200. It's giving me an error here, which, let me just check what it is. Okay, response, expected 1 field, found 2. Okay, so there's only one response, and that response is an HTTP response. So I don't remember how to deconstruct a struct field in a left-hand side expression. Struct in if-let. Let okay, looks like that. Let vec. Okay, so the struct that I want is this HTTP response. This is from the HTTP, so I'm going to need to import a new, response. So I could use that whole use response here, but then I'm just going to be able to reference it directly as response in the actual code. And I think I want to be a little bit clearer about this type, so that I put the full thing here basically. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's try it. No, what am I doing? I want to see what type that X is, because it's not telling me anywhere. I don't think it knows. So this is weird. I don't think my syntax here is completely right. So the value that I want from that is status. So maybe if I write status there. Still doesn't know what type that is. So you need to look this up. Is there a way to destructure a struct partially? Yes. Okay, so I need to say status is the key, but I need to actually destructure it into a variable as well. So I'm going to destructure status as x, and then still doesn't know what type it is. Dot dot means and the rest. So there are lots of other variables there as well. No external create HTTP. So I might just do nested. So I was trying to get clever and deconstruct that entirely in there. Oh, maybe it's because... No, I mean, I still don't have the HTTP type, but this response is actually a tuple, right? Which is a tuple of the response body and the value range. And I don't actually want the value range. I just want the response. So I can just put a nested if statement there, which is fine. If resp.status, yeah, which returns a status code, is not equal to 200, then go straight. Okay. Great, so now I've checked some of those errors. And now I'm interested in the happy path. Which would be to say let values equal current thread IDs dot unwrap So because it's in an option, I need to unwrap it. Using unwrap's not wrong. You just need to make sure that you, some people, I mean, I don't actually know anyone who thinks this, but I can imagine how it might be easy to think that using unwrap is kind of the wrong way to do it, because you should properly use destructuring like this. But that's not actually the case. You just need to make sure that you've done appropriate error checking beforehand to be sure that it's going to be what you expect it to be. So because I've done this appropriate error checking, I'm going to unwrap it, and then I can I guess actually maybe I can get around it by saying something like this. I don't know if let allows you to completely do this would be cool. Oh, that's cool. So I can just actually put, I don't even need a if let statement. I can just do a let statement and destructure that. In this case, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the value range here. Now I need to work out what a value range is. Value range has values. So let value range equal that. Let values equal value range dot values. It's an option vec values. If let sum vec values, then let's just print them for now to make sure that's all gonna check out. Print not current thread IDs but values. Error, could not compile. No external create HTTP. It's true. Pattern error. Okay, so here's a nice thing about Rust. It is telling me that in line 65, there is a refutable pattern in local binding. If I go to 65, it's an error here because what it's telling me is that the pattern error is not covered. So I have said let OK, but the compiler doesn't know that well, this is actually an interesting thing. The error is, I actually have covered the error here because I've said I've checked whether it's an error here, but the compiler does not know that this error actually checks that error, it seems. But what it's suggesting to me is that I might want to restructure this code as a match statement. So what's nice about this is that Rust is forcing me to basically check all of the variants of all of the possible statuses, or at least within the scope of this OK error status. Strange because I did check it. I would have thought that Rust would have been able to catch that, but I can do it by saying this. Resp value range. That's going to go to some code, and error is going to go to some other code, and I can re-put that in there. I can get rid of that. And oops. Okay, so this is just a refactor into a slightly nicer format. And this seems to be fine. Rust is okay with that. And where were we wanted? So this is now printing the values, which is a vec of values. And because I specified it as columns, it gives me a vector of a vector. And in the inner vector, there is the number of columns that I have. So because the range that I specified is just basically one column, or is a slice of a column, it should always just give me one nested vector. So there's no or. I could add here, or no, I'm going to do the error checking in the nest here. If values.len, so I should always expect this to be 1 because this is at the outer layer. So if it's not 1, I'm going to just skip and do something. If it is 1, then I can say values dot get 0. Is there a way? I forget if you can just do this. Consider borrowing here. Okay. So yeah, so I can just index directly into the vec like this. It's telling me to consider borrowing here. I assume because a vec, like a string as we discussed before, is stored on the heap, and this might copy it over or something. So it's saying, why don't you just give yourself a pointer to the inner vec so that you don't have to move data around. That seems like good advice, because there's no point in copying it if I don't need to. And let's print those values. Great, so now it's a vector of strings, which are all the IDs that I need. I'm just gonna pause for a sec. I'll be back shortly. I just need to take a bathroom break. Okay, I'm back. YouTube is telling me that the stream status is poor, which may be the case, but I'm not sure I can do anything about it. So I think I'm just going to continue. Okay. Where were we? Yeah, so we've got now a vec of strings. So I could either cast these strings to some sort of integer or a number type. They're all going to be integers. I think I will do that, just because Google Sheets does no checking around what values are in these cells, or at least I haven't made it do any checking around what values are in these cells. So in there, I might have put protections on the cell, on this column, but it's not infeasible that someone could come in here and type some sort of value like this in here and then it break the whole script. I would prefer for that not to happen. So, I mean, I guess someone could also come in and type this, and then that would still cast to an integer, and we'd have to deal with that error separately, but that is not the error at the moment. And actually that wouldn't, in the logic of the script, this kind of error wouldn't be an issue, because if I added in this random number, all the script is doing is taking in these values and checking that there aren't any edstem IDs that need to be added to here. So even though this is kind of a dud link, presumably, and it will give me some sort of, yeah, you do not have permission to view this thread. It doesn't matter from the script's perspective, because the script isn't actually confirming that any of these are edstem posts. It's just checking that those things that are edstem posts, that we have all of the IDs to match those. So I'm going to cast this to an integer, and the way I can do that is with an iterator for v in values. V is a value. So I'm pretty sure the value here refers to a 30 JSON value, which makes sense. The Google Sheets API, the Google Sheets Rust client that we're using uses these underlying 30 JSON values to represent whatever data comes from the sheet, because that might be dates, it might be numbers, it might be strings. Everything in Google Sheets is kind of stringy, typically. Everything in a cell is usually a string, but there are ways you can format the data as a number, and you can format the number as a date. So I don't know off the top of my head what the Google API, the Google Sheets API returns when you query those things, but it seems reasonable to represent for the Google Sheets Rust client that we're using to represent the data that's coming from it as a JSON value, because anything that could go in JSON, with the exception of possibly an object and an array, and maybe a bool, and possibly null, could not come from the Google Sheets API, but at least there's the string and number distinction. So the way I need to cast this to a number is to use one of these methods. If the value is a number, returns the associated number, otherwise returns null. The number here okay, so I can use that underlying number. So I'm actually going to use a map here and say this vec is not an iterator. Okay, so this, sorry, I was going a bit quick, but this gives me an error which says that vec30 is not an iterator. Try calling into iter or iter. Vec by default is not iterable. It doesn't implement the iterable trait, which is what makes something an iterator. Or rather the iterator trait. So I just have to call iter on it, which turns it into an iterable or an iterator. Then I can call map on it, and map takes a function. I forget how to represent. Oh no, I don't. You say v. Yeah, I do forget how to represent closures in Rust. Oh, the square brackets around the argument and then an arrow. So v is the thing that I'm passing in. Yep, that looks good. And I want to return v dot as number. Okay, and then I'm pretty sure I have to call a dot collect as well. So let's see what it's telling me. Type must be known, yeah. So if I just do this, it doesn't actually perform the iteration. I think because the Rust compiler does some optimization of iterations, so that if you like, yeah, we're iterating over the same value or didn't iterate over certain values. If I called like iter and then head, which takes the first value from the iterator, the Rust compiler can, I think, optimize that out for you and just, you know, do one iteration rather than iterating over the full thing, and then just taking the first value. So it doesn't actually perform the iteration when I call map. I have to call collect at the end of my sort of specification of the operations. But in order to call collect, it tells me here that the type must be known. So it can't actually bring the data from that iterator into this new variable values because it doesn't know what the type of the values is. And I'm pretty sure it needs this because when it assigns a new space for the values data, as in values as a pointer to the data somewhere, it needs to, because it's an iterator, it needs to know how big the kind of separation between those different values are so that it can fill them in. I think this is why it needs the type, but in any case, I need to specify what this type is. This type is going to be a vec. Maybe if I just specify vec. Expected at least one generic argument. Yeah. So generics in Rust you use with the curly brackets. And this underscore indicates that Rust should just infer the type. This seems to work fine. I think I could also, I could also say the actual type here, which is, SERDY JSON number. But then I would have to maybe import SERDY JSON. No, it's because the type here is actually not a SERDY JSON number. It is an option over a number, because this as number returns an option, not a number. So I'm just going to do this. It does indicate that what I might want here. Let's see if I can get this to format my nicely. Nope, doesn't want to let me. I might actually want to do some more things in this iteration, because I want it as number, but I also want to get it out of this option. And what do I want to do if this is an error? So one thing would just be to say unwrap. Then the type of this should be so if I just unwrap it here, it takes it out of the option and just gives me a reference to a vector of references to numbers. I could do this, but this would basically say that if I then put this in here, the unwrap is going to throw a panic, I'm pretty sure. And I might be able to actually just see that. If I run it, it compiles, it runs this code. But when it tries to unwrap that value, it sees that one of them is none, because this value doesn't get cast appropriately to a number, or rather, when it gets cast to, tries to get cast to a number, this returns none instead. So I try to unwrap on a none, and unwrapping on a none panics. Option unwrap. So I don't want to do that. I want to basically I want an error check that says if any of these things are none, then implement some error code. I do ultimately want a reference to SERDY JSON numbers, but I'm not sure in Rust how to do this. To say Rust check if, or Rust throw an error if any item in an iterator meets a condition. Rust implements from iterators, so you can move the result outside and iterators will take care of the rest, including stopping iteration if an error is found. Items result S string S to string 1 2 3 iter map find collect. Find This is because the result. I see. So if I wrap the result of the, if I wrap the vec that I have here, this values vec, inside a result, then if any of the values throws an error, that will just mean that this whole value becomes this whole values item, or this whole values variable becomes an error. So in that case, as number doesn't throw an error though, because an error is different than a none, so I need to convert it from a option to a result. I'm sure there's an easy way to do this. I've even looked at it before. Okay, or. The question mark operator automates the boilerplate associated with early error returns. So maybe I can just use the question mark operator on an option. Expected, what does it tell me here? Cannot use the question mark operator in a closure that returns JSON number. It's true. So it doesn't as option return, yeah, okay, it returns. So maybe I have to use the okay or, what does this do? Arguments passed to okay or evaluated, and it returns the result. I see, okay, so it's okay or, and then throw an error, which is something or value. Let's make my error some value did not pass as a number. And then I should be able to do this question mark. No. Inside there. Expected result at vec number error. So in the result type, I think I need to use the error type. I thought that this was an error type, but maybe I'm wrong. Mismatched types. So one of these errors is telling me that Interesting. Okay, so it wants me to use the sheets for error type with the question mark. So the question mark is basically a way to kind of hoist errors through up through the code. And the value type here, it expects a sheets for error rather than a regular error. There must be, I don't fully know the way that errors work here, but what it's basically saying is that there is an error type that is specified here. And because of the way that I've called something here, maybe because it's a map over these values. Although it's a map over vec, so I don't know exactly why it expects a sheets for error here, but it does expect a sheets for error. So this error is not a sheets for error. This is the that's not very helpful, but this is the standard library error basically. So one option would be to try to do a sheets for error here. If you import error, refer to it directly. Do I import error? I do. Okay, so yeah, so the error that I need to hoist is a sheets for error. It still doesn't like it for some reason. Yeah, it's a sheets for error, but the error is an enum here, and I need to say what kind of sheets for error it is. So I'm just going to say it's a failure, I guess, because I don't really care what kind of error it is here. I'm just trying to use the internal, I'm just trying to use the internal sheets for error to hoist my own error through, and then I'll handle my own error. This doesn't like it, and I think it's because of another reason. Okay, so this okay or doesn't seem to want me to give it an error. Oh. Yeah, so the enum, the error type enum in the Sheets 4 API uses Rust enums, but it's got an argument for the Rust enum. So when I say a failure, it indicates an HTTP response with a non-success status. Yeah, so I'm just I can use the bad request error type here, because as I said, I'm going to handle it myself. So even though it's kind of a little bit strange, I'm going to use the bad request type because I can pass it a certi JSON value. The certi JSON value is the one that I was not able to pass. which is the V. And I think I'm going to have to clone that V. Yeah, so I can hoist that error through now. Now I'm getting another error, which is that value of type vex30json number cannot be built from standard iterator item equals 30json number from iterator. It's not implemented. The trait from iterator is implemented for vect. Oh, okay. So I think I put this add in before because the at from the collection before I had this result, values itself was going to be a reference to some things, and this means that I'm creating a new vec, which again is fine because I'm not trying to optimize the code. And you can see now that even though I have this bad value in here, this still runs fine. And if I print what I got out here, great, yeah. So because there is a single error, this whole result becomes an error. So this allows me to basically do the error check that I was trying to do, because I can now say, I could do an if let, for example. I could do an if let, or I could just say if values is error, because I don't actually care too much about what this error is exactly. This is not correct though, because it shouldn't have given an error on that one. I think the okay or why doesn't that return okay? Returns an option on a number. Shouldn't it return? So this shouldn't return an error because this is a legitimate number. The only one that should return an error is this one. Presumably the one that's returning an error is the first one. 339, yeah, 0593. But I don't want it to return an error. So let's work out what's happening here. Autocode gets rid of my things. v is an option on a number. V dot clone here. Okay, yeah. So this should actually say, call it n for number. Okay, or either unpacks the number or it returns an error. As a number should return the value, or the sum number or none. And then I can do v.clone there. And the reason I restructured that is so that I can see what's going on here. Why does this n give me a none? So as number is not doing what I want it to do there. Oh, it's because the number, I think I know why. It's because, it's because this, this is a string, not a number. It's a thing that needs to be, so this is what I was saying about Google Sheets APIs. Google doesn't give you this as a number, even though it looks like a number. It gives it to you as a string of the digits that are inside that number. So I need to actually pass it as a string, and then I need to create a, I need to pass it as a string, and then I need to check whether I can cast it to a number in some Rust type, I guess. So I could say as string, it's an option over string. The OKRs should always kind of work now in this case, but I can still, so I'm going to call this S for string, and the S can be unpacked as, so I can actually just check. So it's going to be an option on a string. If S dot is none, there isn't as none, then I want to return a error, which is going to be the same error that I had before, error bad request, and v dot clone. So return type inferred to be sheets 4 error here. Is that right? I think it's complaining because it doesn't want me to return a sheets 4 error here. So this is to do with the way that this iterator actually deals with this error, and I don't think I fully understood what was going on in terms of this iteration turning to an error. So in here, this doesn't actually return the error. It just, no, it does return the error, sorry. Find returns an error and result implements from iterator. So I think I should return the error, but maybe I need to return some value here. Mismatch types expected. Yeah, now it expects an error. Maybe I just need to do return type inferred to be result, standard string here. So I need to work out how this find is fine in terms of theater.map, but this map is returning an error, but it is not fine to return an error. So I guess when you use this kind of functionality of result implementing the from iterator, presumably this from iterator of the result checks all of the vex, checks all of the values that are inside it, to see whether they are errors. And only if none of them are errors, then it turns into an OK. That's what I'm going to assume. So that means I need to wrap the happy path results as well in an OK. And here I need to say yeah, so I need to wrap this in an error so that the iterator collect this result can work out that there was one bad error in there. As I said, I don't actually know how this would return anything other than a string, so it might actually even be an error that I don't need to check. I might just put in a comment here. Sheets API returned something other than a string. Returned a value. string. Otherwise, we have to return some value that is okay. We don't actually want to return the string. I want to return a number, which is going to be the string to like a int or something. Int 32 in Rust. Use pass. Pass is I32. Okay, in, I'm going to say it's I32. Is this right? Use option expect. Yeah, so it will pass will throw an error if this does not pass to an I32, and expect gives me a way to return something else otherwise. I can also specify pass in this way. My string I32 unwrap. Pass I32. Still wants me to top pass. Not sure why it doesn't like that. Method found on option. Yeah, okay, so this is an option on a string. I can unwrap this here because I have, because I have checked whether it's none there. I should probably do something like this where I say match s. If s is none, then return this value. Otherwise, sum s, then do this value, and then I don't need that unwrap, basically. This wants me to return a result, so then I can return OK in. Missing a comma. This is a result of an I32 pass error, so I do still want to check that this what's going on in this result, because this is catching this error here. So yeah, I could put another match statement. It's getting pretty nested. I think I can do in dot okay or no. What's the result? Rust okay or. Okay or is for options. is okay. Returns true if the result is okay and the value inside of it matches a precedent. Converts from a result to option. Okay, so this would be one option, although it's not very nice. Let me just do another match. So result returns not a sum or a none, but an okay on some value, right? Which is now an I32, which is great, or an error on some value, which means it's not going to pass. And in this case, I want to return the same thing here. So I could even put this. I could have put it up there, but I think Rust will probably optimize this duplication in some kind of way. So match arms. Okay, so it's not really appropriate for a match, as it turns out, because I do want to return this as an okay. I just want to check whether it's an error first. Actually, I don't want to check because it's an error, because I can just return the pass int error. Let's try it. Actually, I think this is going to give me the same error further down. Yeah. It says it needs that to be a Google Sheets error rather than a pass int error. So I am going to do this. If n is error, return this, else return n. It's kind of messy. Yeah. So there are ways in Rust to do like nice conversion between different errors. So I could convert from a pass int error to a Google Sheets error, and then there would be some kind of like mapping between it. That would probably be the nicer way to do it. This is a kind of hackier way around it that just says, in this it's already in a result, right? N is already in a result, but I unwrap it to get the I32 that's inside it, and then I put it into another result, which is not great, but it works. So I'm going to stick with it. Cool. And then what I want to check is that this actually works in the way that I expected it to, which is to throw an error in this case. So it should get through all of these cases and then throw an error in this case. Nice. The empty string is okay. All of those strings seem okay. It's interesting that it printed it like this, but it does seem to have done the correct thing. Well, let's actually see the result. So what I want to happen is that I want this whole result to basically read into this vec, see that there's one bad request in it, and turn itself into an error, so that I can just check whether there's any bad error with this one thing. I don't know that it's going to do that. Yes. Okay, great. Oh, maybe I have another print statement somewhere. Oh yeah, I still have that other print statement. Okay, so if I get rid of that print statement, it should just return true. Yep. And if I then get rid of this, which means that the sheet's good again, this should return false. Yes. Okay, great. Obviously, if I was writing, if you were writing this as a proper kind of application to run in production or something in a more meaningful way, you would want to write tests. I'm kind of doing the tests just manually as I go, sort of running them to work out the error cases. That's not ideal. I should probably write tests for these different cases to catch all of them. So let me just, Rust test template. Rust has a really nice and easy way to write tests, which is this format. Mod tests. Use super. And then I can just annotate it as a test. And then write a function which says test X, for example, and then run some test. And then I assert something in the test, such as assert equal 1, 1, which is always going to return 2, true. And then if I run cargo test, it's going to run the test suite instead. So this is a really nice way of doing tests. The test suite here is actually going to have to mock some things unless I am comfortable with the test suite actually going to the Google API and querying the thing, which I'm not really, because that would mean that querying the actual sheet, sorry, is what I mean, which I'm not really, because that's kind of an integration test rather than a test that's local to this library. So what I would probably want to do instead is mock the calls like this do it, basically, where the do it basically will just return some data rather than actually going to the request, and it won't care about the service count.json. It's not exactly how I would normally I would stop here and write the tests for the things as I'm going. And maybe I will do that when I pick this up. Yeah, maybe I'll start with the tests when I continue on this next time. But it's been quite a long stream, and as I said, this is my first stream. So I think I'm just going to end here for the time being, and then I'll put another part up to the stream where I finish this stuff off. There's quite a bit more to do. It did not take 2 or 3 hours, which is what I thought it would take. It's taken a lot longer than that, partially because I'm walking through and explaining things. But yeah, I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you shortly for the rest of the stream.